Hello, everyone. I'm glad you joined me because I'm going to speak on it. So this news article comes from Knox News out of Tennessee. And I found it a very interesting piece, very disturbing, and wanted to talk about it. I notice in our society, people will try anything and get away with it. And get away with it for a long time. I noticed that we have become a culture of people who don't fucking pay attention. And for a person to get away with what I'm about to read shows that people are not paying attention. They obviously don't give a fuck. And that is a dangerous mindset to be in. So let me read this. A felon masqueraded as an East Tennessee nurse for years. Now she pleads guilty to fraud. A convicted felon who stole other women's identities to pose as a registered nurse worked for years at a slew of East Tennessee institutions, where she falsified records, administered medication, and performed procedures without any medical training or experience, federal court records show. So for years she did this. And sounds like nobody was paying attention. Sounds like you're hiring a person and you're oblivious. Like, okay, look at this before we get a little bit further into this news article. You know, when you have an interview, I would think that the facility you're going to work at during the interview would check for your speech, check for your grammar, or what am I trying to say? Basically, your knowledge of words you normally use in that profession. So you would think they would ask questions in order to kind of gauge your experience. And if this person is stealing identities, is not really a nurse, didn't have any training, what kind of medical terminology does this person know? Are you looking for that? What are you looking for? A resume is not good enough. You know what? Because even necessarily going to school is not good enough. Because to me, the training is what matters. How you know how to follow procedures. You don't learn that in school. You learn the facts. You learn just, and I say this because I used to be a CNA. And it was crazy because I couldn't imagine taking the nursing test, because the CNA test, although not the hardest thing in the world, it still had terminologies that you needed to know and pass on the test. There still were skills you needed to know, right? And so those terminologies and skills can easily be shown or assessed in an interview. Because this is not the first time somebody has perpetuated being like somebody in the medical field. People have done this before, so you would want to be aware of that. I mean, you might not think your facility would get a person like that, or somebody who is just an outright liar, or trying to do something in this heinous fashion. But you have to be safe. We're talking about people's lives. This is the medical field, nurse, doctor, you know what I'm saying? Like, you need to be sure. And I would think they would have protocols in the interview to really kind of test that. Listen to the terminology the person is using. You know what I'm saying? You know, have them go over a couple of procedures, showing how they record patients' information, even just as simple as washing your hands, because there's a specific way you're supposed to wash your hands, you know. And if people are stealing and just falsifying and lying, you know, you might not say to take it this far, but when it comes to a person's life, I think it's very serious. So let's get further into this. This really bothered me. Misty Dawn Bacon, 44, of Morristown, pleaded guilty Wednesday to charges of wire fraud, healthcare fraud, and identity theft in the U.S. District Court in Greenville. Prosecutors announced in a news release she could face up to 45 years in prison. While masquerading as a nurse, Bacon worked for nursing homes, assisted living facilities, a gynecologist's office, and as an in-home nurse for shut-in patients, according to her plea agreement. She fraudulently collected more than $200,000 in pay during the scheme, which ran from at least 2012 until September of last year. So she was probably sitting up there collecting that, especially when you're doing, like, that's why I said the CNA thing. You know, I'm not going to say it's a nurse, but we see, you know, we see how things work, and we're close to nurses. So as far as being around them, and, you know, but and a nurse is basically, you know, an educated CNA, basically. Especially when it comes to, like, in-home nurse and, like, shut-in patients, assisted living. I used to work in some of those things, and, you know, I would make sure the patient had their medication. I would have to write down their vitals and the medication that they took. I would have to change them, and all those type of things. So I know this lady was just, especially in a place where, say, you're in an assisted living facility and they have their own rooms, you could sit there and do nothing. You could sit there and literally do nothing for them, and then the people who take the next shift will have to do it. You write down that you did do it, but you really didn't. God, this lady. I don't like, it sounds like she worked more with the elderly, and that's bothersome to me, because especially when a person is elderly, you know, they may have Alzheimer's, dementia, you know, there's all kinds of things that plague them. You know, their body doesn't move, and so they require the assistance of someone. And for somebody to just take advantage of an older person, you know, just think about when you get older. You know, this woman, she could kick rocks. I would throw a rock at her forehead, because this is so cringeworthy. It's just like, oh man. And I'm sure she just sat there and didn't do what she was supposed to do, and these people needed help. Okay. Bacon was convicted in 2003 of charges she stole from a bank where she worked. Told Tennessee Bureau of Investigations agent she hatched her plan after she researched her first and middle name on the state health department website and found a woman who had a current license to be a registered nurse in Tennessee. The latest news good God. Bacon went on to use the partial names and license number of 2 registered nurses to score jobs at 8 healthcare providers over a 6-year span. She repeatedly lied to employers, saying she had never been convicted of a felony, that she had a nursing license, and she held a nursing degree from Walter State Community College. In the plea agreement, prosecutors detailed several instances in which Bacon's lack of expertise hurt the people she treated. See? In 2013, for example, she visited a Morristown patient's home and administered 10 times the prescribed amount of insulin. As a result, the patient had to be hospitalized for 3 days. See, this is what I'm talking. This is why you need to, especially in the medical field, it's so important that a person be qualified. It's not that hard to be qualified. To figure out if a person is qualified for these things. Don't just stop at their word. And it really seemed to me they were stopping at her word, because if she didn't know the terminology, she didn't know how to properly do stuff. So you could have weeded that out to me very quickly. Because even, like I said, a CNA or even a nurse, a nurse who, is just, getting her first job, their mind is fresh with the terminology. You feel what I'm saying? So even if they don't have the experience yet, the terminology is there. And, some of the practices that you learn, like washing your hands and whatnot and recording stuff, that's fresh in your mind. You can go step by step and show those things. And they could have easily weeded this woman out. I just, in this day and age, we need to be, you don't want to give a person a hard time finding a job, especially if they're brand new. But for the safety of the patients, because even now, what was that? Oh man, there was a whole, wow, it's hard to determine this, but there was like a whole article and situation about this man who had raped, and he was a nursing assistant, and had raped a disabled person in a facility, an assisted facility, and she became pregnant. And you can't necessarily know that somebody is going to do that. Of course, check their background for any sexual history, of course. But in this case, they didn't know the lady was pregnant until she gave birth, I believe. So that right there is not paying attention. And like in this article, she was able to get away with not having skills. She might have learned some in 6 years, but not having the expertise she needed to be a nurse and have nursing skills, she got away with that for years. So people weren't paying attention. And just like in the thing I expressed, the other article I expressed about the man violating this woman and getting her pregnant, people weren't paying attention to her. Not paying attention to her changes. I think they even said that her menstruation has stopped. So at that point, let's get a doctor. Let's look into that. It's normal that she gets a menstruation and somebody changes her. So if your menstruation stops and she was still young, and it wasn't time for her to have menopause, they should have paid attention to that. And it's a lot of places, assisted facilities, where people are not getting paid attention to, and they're getting just the worst kind of care, and it's okay. It's, and this is when a person can slide in there with no real credentials, not even a nurse, taking somebody's identity, and just can come in there and do shit like this because nobody's paying attention. So medical facilities, be aware, because I'm not going to say I would ever put my mom in a place like this, and I would not hope that my kids care enough about me if something goes wrong when I'm older that they wouldn't put me into a facility. But if some shit like this happened to me, ooh, I'm going to take them for everything, because this is no bueno. No bueno. This is no. So let's see. Okay. In 2014, Bacon falsified medical records by recording patients' blood sugar levels when she never checked those levels. The agreement states in 2018 she didn't properly document a patient's wounds, leading to incorrect care, and also failed to update a patient's medication list. God damn, she was stupid. Shit, even when my mom was sick with cancer, I had a medication list. I had it all. Well, I mean, I used to be a CNA, so maybe that's where that comes from. But damn, it's like, did she read up on it at all? Damn, and the fact that she didn't know anything and was able to get away with it this long, that's what's baffling to me. She don't sound like she educated herself before she decided to falsify her life or anything. Just like she walked in there, said, I'm Miss Bacon, I'm a nurse, I went to this school, and they hired her. That's what it sounded like. Okay. According to court records, Bacon worked for Interim Health Care in Morristown, Jefferson City Health and Rehabilitation Center, Beverly Park in Knoxville. Be aware of these names. Five Rivers OBGYN in Morristown. Camilla Home Health. Suncrest Home Health. Life Care of Jefferson City and Amnesty, I guess. Amnesty fired Bacon in November 2018 after confirming an anonymous tip that she was not a licensed nurse. Authorities began questioning her in January. In addition to decades in prison, Bacon could face fines up to $750,000 and restitution that could exceed that figure. She is scheduled to be sentenced on April 3rd in the United States District Court in Greenville. Wow. So all these places hired her. And that's just shows their lack of care for their patients, that they didn't figure this out. Some way there has to be a better protocol. Because like I'm saying, and I'm constantly going to repeat myself, but there are keys that you catch on to when you're interviewing somebody. And one of those keys is the terminology. You ask the questions that would garner the response of the terminology you're looking for. Just off bat. Just off top. People may not think of that, may not have thought of that before. But you want to see in the interview, some awareness. You want to hear some awareness and the terminology that should be used. Even if they, like I said, even if they're new to nursing, the terminology is fresh in their mind. And even if they're not used to using it all the time, I would believe that they would try to use some of the wording, and some of those words, because I don't even remember all of them, but I remember taking the test, and a lot of those wording in the documents and the medical, a lot of people would have their medical records in a file or whatever, and so the terminology is there. It's I just hate people taking advantage of the elderly, especially. It seems like she did more of that than anything. And when you're sick and ailing, it's hard to speak up for yourself. And a lot of times elderly people don't have family that come and see them very often. And by the time somebody comes to visit, well, the abuse has went on and they're used to it. They're too tired to explain. They can't talk. They're under medication. So many variables that goes into somebody being able to get away with something like this for so long. But at the same time, there should be someone checking on their employees, you know, checking on the health of the patients, actually asking, you know, actually asking, how are you being treated? You know what I'm saying? Things of that nature. But we got to do better because, you know, people out here doing any kind of type of thing. You know, people are raping people, you know, in these facilities, elderly people, you know, mistreating them, you know, even different races treat other races different, you know, and people need to be aware. You know, it's a lot of situations where people could get better, but the care they receive doesn't make it that way. So this is just something, you know, to be aware of, as everything is, especially for medical facilities. You know, a lot of people do heinous things, and you need to be prepared and think about it this way. When you need to go to the hospital for help, you know, you want somebody who has experience helping you. And if they don't have experience, you want to know that they're new and they're getting great training by somebody who has experience. So that's how I feel on this. Talk to you later. So speak on it in the chat and let me know what you think about this situation.